Everyone assumes Camilla will simply become the next Queen Mother, following the exact same path Queen Elizabeth's own mother walked for 50 years. She won't. That title is legally off the table for her, permanently. And what actually replaces it is a title so old, so rarely used, that the last woman to hold it died almost 200 years ago. This isn't speculation. This is constitutional fact. And once you understand why, you'll see just how uncertain Camilla's entire future inside this family really is. Her title, her home, and even her public role are all still completely up in the air. Here's the rule almost nobody explains properly. Queen Mother isn't just a nickname handed to any king's widow. It has two strict requirements. She has to be the wife of the previous king, and she has to be the birth mother of the current one. Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon checked both boxes. She was married to King George VI, and her daughter Elizabeth II took the throne after he died in 1952. That's exactly why she became the Queen Mother, and stayed one of the most visible, most beloved royal figures in Britain for the next 5 decades, right up until her death in 2002 at the age of 101. Camilla checks only one of those boxes. William isn't her son. He's Charles's son from his first marriage to Diana, Princess of Wales. That single biological fact permanently rules Camilla out of the Queen Mother title, no matter how close she and William eventually become as stepmother and stepson, no matter how long Charles reigns, no matter what the public decides to informally call her one day. So what does she actually become instead? Constitutional experts and royal historians point to a title most people have genuinely never even heard of: Queen Dowager. It's real, it's historically accurate, and it's almost never been used in modern British history. The last woman to formally hold it was Queen Adelaide, back in 1837, after her husband King William IV died. That's nearly 2 centuries ago. If Camilla eventually takes this title, she'll be reviving a designation the monarchy hasn't actually needed in generations. There are technically other options too. Camilla could choose to revert to an earlier title, like Princess Dowager, or even go back to being known simply as the Duchess of Cornwall, the title she held before Charles's coronation. But most royal commentators agree Queen Dowager remains the most likely and the most historically consistent choice, assuming the family, the government, and constitutional advisors all agree on using it when the time comes. Let's be completely clear about something else too, because this gets asked constantly in royal forums and comment sections. Camilla will never become the reigning monarch of the United Kingdom, not temporarily, not symbolically, not under any circumstance whatsoever. British succession law is airtight on this point. The Bill of Rights from 1689 and the Act of Settlement from 1701 restrict the throne strictly to people born into the royal bloodline itself. Camilla married into the family in 2005. She was never in the line of succession, not on her wedding day, and not now, more than 20 years later. Her 2023 title change, from Queen Consort to simply Queen, gave her exactly 0 additional constitutional power. She is, and will always legally remain, the spouse of the reigning monarch. Never the monarch herself, and never someone who could inherit that position under any interpretation of current law. Here's what makes this whole situation even more interesting. Even her current title almost didn't happen the way most people now assume it always would have. When Camilla married Charles in April 2005, the official plan looked completely different from what we have today. Clarence House stated clearly at the time that she would be known as Princess Consort, not Queen Consort, once Charles eventually became king. This wasn't some minor technicality or accident of wording. It was a deliberate, carefully considered decision, made specifically out of respect for Diana, Princess of Wales, given how genuinely divisive Camilla's role in the breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage had been in the public eye for decades. That plan held firm for 17 years. Then, in February 2022, on the eve of her Platinum Jubilee marking 70 years on the throne, Queen Elizabeth II did something nobody fully expected. She issued a public statement, in her own words, expressing her, quote, sincere wish that Camilla would be known as Queen Consort when Charles became king, not through palace aides, not through a quiet policy update buried in a press release. Directly, publicly, from the Queen herself, using one of the single biggest platforms of her entire 70-year reign to say it out loud to the nation. Charles responded publicly the very next day, saying that he and Camilla were, in his own words, deeply conscious of the honor represented by his mother's wish. Royal historians at the time described the moment as Elizabeth deliberately choosing to legitimize Camilla's future using her own personal authority, on her own terms, while she still had the platform to do it herself, rather than leaving the decision to be sorted out later. It effectively ended 17 years of public uncertainty and tabloid speculation in a single, carefully worded sentence. When Elizabeth died that September, just 7 months later, and Charles officially became king, Camilla took the title exactly as promised, Queen Consort. By 2023, following Charles's coronation, that simplified further into everyday use as simply Queen Camilla, though her actual underlying constitutional position never changed one bit. Now here's a question that remains completely unresolved even today. Where does Camilla even live once William eventually takes the throne? Charles and Camilla have called Clarence House their home since 2003, and it remains their primary London residence right now, even as some royal activity gradually shifts toward Buckingham Palace, with major renovation work there expected to finish around 2027. But when Charles's reign eventually ends, nobody actually knows for certain whether Camilla stays at Clarence House at all. According to royal reporting, one realistic outcome is that she relocates permanently to Mill House, a private property she has personally owned for years, entirely separate from any official royal residence. The friends of Camilla have described this home to the Telegraph as a genuine personal escape, somewhere she can finally shut her own front door and have real, uninterrupted privacy after decades of public royal life. And there's a harder possibility too. Some royal commentators believe William could simply decide that Camilla shouldn't remain at Clarence House at all once he becomes king, regardless of what she personally wants, purely as part of a broader restructuring of royal households for his own upcoming reign. No official decision exists on this yet. This genuinely remains an open question, one that will likely only be settled once William actually inherits the crown and starts making these calls himself. Beyond questions of title and housing, there's an even bigger unanswered question hanging over all of this. How much of Camilla's public working life actually survives Charles's reign once it ends? Right now, she serves as patron or president of more than 90 separate charities and organizations, according to Buckingham Palace's own official public listings. That represents roughly 2 decades of steadily accumulated charitable work and public commitment. What happens to all of it once William becomes king is, according to royal experts, entirely his personal call to make. Nothing in royal tradition or law legally guarantees Camilla keeps any part of it once the reign changes hands. History gives a genuinely mixed signal here. Royal widows have, at times, continued limited public duties, tied to causes they'd already spent years personally championing, especially where those causes had become closely associated with them individually. But nobody is currently promising Camilla anything close to what Elizabeth the Queen Mother had: 5 full decades of sustained, high-profile public life, fully backed by an established household, dedicated staff, and consistent royal support. It's entirely possible that some, or even most, of Camilla's current patronages could simply transfer over to Kate as the new queen instead, depending entirely on how William chooses to shape his own reign. Camilla herself has already described how she personally sees her own position within the monarchy, even years before formally becoming queen. In an interview with the Australian Women's Weekly, she explained that she learned early on that a consort's place is, in her own words, several feet behind the monarch, there as a backup. That's not simply a throwaway line from an interview. It's a genuine description of someone who appears to understand that her entire public role exists fundamentally in service of whoever currently wears the crown, rather than as something she personally owns or controls independently of that relationship. Step back for a moment and look at the full picture here. Camilla's title after Charles's reign ends is genuinely undecided. Her home after Charles is genuinely undecided. Her ongoing public role after Charles is genuinely undecided. 3 of the biggest, most consequential questions about her entire future, and all 3 remain completely open right now. What's actually settled, with total constitutional certainty, is only what she'll never get. Never the Queen Mother title, because that specifically requires a biological connection to the next monarch that simply doesn't exist between her and William. Never the reigning monarch herself, because UK succession law was written centuries ago, specifically and deliberately, to prevent exactly that scenario from ever happening. Everything else, her title, her home, her public role, sits in a genuine gray zone that depends entirely on decisions William hasn't actually had to make yet, because he isn't king yet. That's actually a much bigger shift than most people realize when they first hear about it. For most of the monarchy's modern history, each royal transition simply copied whatever structure had come directly before it, almost automatically. Elizabeth the Queen Mother's 50 years of sustained visibility effectively became the assumed template for what a royal widow's life should look like going forward. But Camilla's situation shows something genuinely different happening within the institution now, a monarchy that no longer assumes automatic continuity from one reign to the next, where every new king might genuinely end up building his own household completely from scratch, according to his own priorities. So here's the real question worth sitting with. Should Camilla eventually get a role as visible and long-lasting as Elizabeth the Queen Mother once had for 50 years? Or is it actually healthier, in the long run, for each new king to build his own household completely fresh, without automatically carrying forward the entire structure of the reign that came directly before him? Tell me what you honestly think in the comments below, and if you want more fact-checked, deeply researched breakdowns of how the monarchy's rules and traditions actually work behind the headlines, go ahead and subscribe, because we're only just getting started uncovering stories like this one.